see the beautiful artwork on the screen, and also the sponsors and partners that we have for tonight's main event. First, our UF partners. I'd like to thank the Center for Gender, Sexualities, and Women's Studies Research, the Center for European Studies, the Center for Arts, Migration, and Entrepreneurship at the College of the Arts, the Center for Latin American Studies, and the Center for the Study of Race and Race Relations, as well as the UF International Center. We had a great partnership going across UF, as you can tell. I'd also like to thank some of our individual sponsors, some of whom are here tonight. Thank you so much to Peter Stackpool and Sarah Jo Nixon, to Ruth Steiner, Wes and Brenda Wheeler, the Harn Curator of Photography Endowment, and James Toussaint for all supporting this wonderful exhibition and talk tonight. Following the talk tonight, please stick around. We're open till 9 p.m. as we are every Thursday now, thanks to our new program, Art After Dark, where you get to enjoy your museum every Thursday night late. You can stay as late as you want, go to the cafe, and just enjoy being in the museum, enjoying your artwork in your art museum. Now I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Eric Siegel, who is the Director of Education and Curator for Academic Programs.
Thank you, Leah. Thank you, Leah. Hi, welcome. This evening is occasioned by the introduction of a first work of art by Fabiola Jean-Louis into the Harn collection. I'm hoping for more. And its current presentation in awesome time, materiality, and meaning, curated by Carol McCusker. I first became aware of Fabiola's work a couple of years ago when my colleague and wife, Dr. Melissa Hyde, professor of art history and scholar of 18th and 19th century European art, shared with me her enthusiasm for the Rethinking History project, and then shared that enthusiasm with Carol, our curator of photography. Together, Carol and Melissa hatched a plan, which really in short led to where we are tonight. So it's super exciting, and I thank you both, Carol and Melissa, as well as all of our wonderful UF partners. Brief introductions. Dr. Porchia Moore is a valued colleague here at UF, where she serves as rotating program head of museum studies, UF assistant professor of museum studies, and affiliate faculty in the Center for Arts, Migration, and Entrepreneurship. She teaches about museums and race, national parks and historic sites, and design thinking, and she catalyzes everything she touches. She really does. Everything she touches, seeking to transform learning and museums to serve all audiences in meaningful ways. At the Harn, she co-curated a remarkable photography exhibition focusing on Black experience that was Shadow to Substance 2021 and 2022, which explored art, healing, myth, intimacy, joy, resistance, and rebirth. And of course, she did that with Carol and Kimberly Williams, a graduate student intern and co-curator. She holds a PhD from the University of South Carolina in the School of Library and Information Science, the McKissick and the McKissick Museum Management Program. Porchia has participated, there's a lot of P's here, Porchia has participated in prestigious programs such as, what was I thinking? Such as the IMLS Laura Bush 21st Century Cultural Heritage Informatics Leadership Librarian Fellowship, and quite a few others. She's an international speaker, a strategist, a facilitator, an educator, an activist scholar working in and with institutions to achieve real change. You may have heard her as a keynote speaker at the Ontario Museums Association, the Smithsonian Museum of American History, or the Association of American Art Museum Directors, excuse me, or at one of many, many other convenings where she speaks. And you will find Porchia's writings in a wide range of articles and edited volumes on museums and on education and learning. And I recommend to you her 2022 book, Transforming Inclusion in Museums, published by the American Alliance of Museums. It's really wonderful. So thank you for being here, Porchia. Fabiola Jean-Louis is an innovative artist and maker working in photography, paper sculpture, paper textiles, installation, paintings, and really beyond. She's an extraordinary teacher and an inspiring thinker, I have found so far in the last few days. We've gotten to know each other. Fabiola is a Brooklynite born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, currently teaching and working in an artist residency at the University of Central Arkansas. And she's held other important residencies at the Museum of Art and Design the Museum of Art and Design in New York City and Lux Museum in San Diego. Her writing history project, and the work in the Harn is from that project, is a body of work consisting of period paper gowns and painterly photographs. It examines the presence and absence of power and race in Eurocentric history and art history in order to reveal truths about the past, but also very much about the present. The project has been presented at several Smithsonian affiliate institutions. Fabiola's work was included in the Brick Media Group exhibition, Bordering the Imaginary, Art from the Dominican Republic, Haiti, and their Diasporas. And in 2021, the Metropolitan Museum of Art commissioned a paper sculpture for Beyond Yesterday, We Could Fly, an Afrofuturist, Before Yesterday We Could Fly, an Afrofuturist period room. She's the first Haitian female artist to show at the Met. The Yale Beinecke Rare Books Manuscript Library has acquired the entire Rewriting History suite, along with 3 paper sculptures. That's fabulous. It's also a snapping page, thank you. And if you've missed her works in any of these presentations, you might have seen them featured in the New York Times, Architectural Digest, Vogue, Elle Decor, Huffington Post, the Chicago Tribune, Modern Luxury, Art News, Art Critical, Hyperallergic, the Atlanta Arts Constitution, the Chicago Sun-Times, the Fashion Journal, the Haitian Times, and elsewhere, including Here Now Tonight.
Yes. Welcome to
Really good.
welcome to Gator Nation.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Thank you. We are so excited to be here with you. Such a huge fan of your work. Such a huge fan. We are just ending our celebration of Black History Month, but for many of us, we celebrate Black History 365, right? Yes. But this is also March, and it means that we are ushering in Women's History Month. And so because of that, I want to begin by clicking this clicker. Oh. Is it upside down? Well, Eric's. Oh, yeah. Thank you. Oh, perfect. So I want to begin with a quote from Bell Hooks, who was our now beloved ancestor. And Bell Hooks has this to say. She says that definitions are vital starting points for the imagination. What we cannot imagine cannot come into being. A good definition marks our starting point and lets us know where we want to end up. So my first question for you, Fabiola, is what for you is imagination, and specifically, what is Black imagination?
Ooh,
The easy question first.
right. So, imagination is memory,
Yes.
and it's not just the memory that our minds hold, but our DNA memory, our spiritual memory, right? There's memory in really everything. And so that's where my imagination really starts to become alive, because I can really only imagine my ancestors. I don't know them, I've never seen them, many of them. And so I have to imagine what they were like. I have to imagine what their voices were. I have to imagine what they would tell me now and how they are informing me. And they come through me in everything that I do. So my work is never from a place of the surface. It's always, it's almost like in the mirror, diving into the metaphysical world where I have to be with them. And so imagination is really central in having that communication and then reimagining not only the present that I'm in sometimes, but the future, right? Because, and that's part of what Afrofuturism for me really is, and being a time traveler is for me, is that I get to tell these stories in ways that project my hopes for the future. And I get to suggest what I hope the present will be, what it can be. And so I'm kind of making up the future as I am here in this moment.
Okay. Sort of like, thank you for that. Sort of like how Toni Morrison talks about remembering, like how as artists and makers or even just as Black people, we remember in our own bodies the past in that present moment.
We remember everything, things that we can't name, and we can't give details to, but they show up in different ways. They show up as sometimes happy things, sometimes things that trigger us, and we don't know why. And so we have to use our imagination a lot of times to tap into those things, yeah.
Okay, thank you. In your work collectively, what do you define for yourself as the starting point, and where do you want to end up in the process of your making?
Oof, wow, good questions. We didn't plan any of this, by the way. Okay, so ask me that question one more time.
In your work collectively, what do you define for yourself as the starting point of your imagination? And where do you want to end up in the process of your making?
So the starting point is always identity, my Haitianness. There's a very large conversation that happens around whether or not an artist wants to be called an artist, a Black artist, versus not. For me, because I'm Haitian and because I'm a Black woman, it is important for me to use that because I want my audience to know who's speaking to them. I don't want to disappear into the title of artist. And so what that looks like is I'm tapping into voodoo. I'm tapping into the planting of the 2 feet on the ground and song and dance, prayer, things that were taken away, right, during enslavement. I'm tapping into so many different things, and so identity, or what I like to call the mosaic of Blackness, is extremely important and at the center. And then it's really like an onion of, taking off all the different layers to see what I'm going to find. And so the journey is the most important part to me. It's not necessarily where I'm going to go, but it's how I heal through that journey. So I'm working through pain, I'm working through trauma that doesn't oftentimes belong to me. And then I'm also working through the ones that do belong to me, through the fear of raising my Black children or my biracial children in a world that doesn't understand them. And so really that's what the journey looks like. It's a beautiful journey of honesty and vulnerability and hope and otherworldliness.
Yes, which we're going to talk about. Thank you for that. So you are an extremely prolific artist. You have many, multiple ongoing series. For many people in this room, they might have come to your work from any number of those series. But I also think a large number of people in the room come to your work through your photography, and most specifically, your Polaroid series. These are some of my favorite images from all of your work collectively. They're just absolutely gorgeous. So Eric mentioned the exhibition that Carol brilliantly designed last year, From Shadow to Substance. And in that exhibition, we talked a lot about this notion of fashioning the self, particularly from formerly enslaved folks, how they use the power of the photograph to fashion a self, to create new worlds, particularly when we think about people like Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth. And so I would like for you to kind of talk to us about this Polaroid series and also your relationship between how you think about the camera and the act of taking a photograph as a kind of liberation or an act of freedom.
So I'll start backwards.
Okay.
And so an image is extremely powerful. And it directs the narrative. And if the wrong people are directing the narrative, then we know what happens. And then we have all of these misunderstandings about who people really are, just from one image. And so when we're talking about the diaspora, right? And when I say the diaspora, that's Haiti, that's the Caribbean, that's all Black, spread out across the world, right? When we're talking about the diaspora, it becomes extremely important to control that narrative. And so for me, it was important to talk about really ugly truths, or using beauty as a vehicle to carry ugly truths and talk about them in that way. So being honest about that trauma and the violence and all of those things, but then choosing to control the narrative in the way that I wanted to, as far as showing respect for the lives that were lost, in opposition to the way I was seeing Black bodies shown on TV, dead, uncovered, no respect, no honor, right? And so that was my way of saying, giving us our humanity, you know, back in the way that I could. And so that's why the image, the photograph is so important, right? And showing up in that way. And then, you know, on fashioning thyself or fashioning yourself through clothing. I went the route of fashion, and I went to high school for fashion in New York. Because I learned very early on that fashion is a way of having armor on. And it can communicate things to people that you want to communicate without ever seeing a room. If you want people to stay away from you, you can literally dress in a way that would make people stay away. There's ways that we communicate who we are through that, and there's ways that we protect ourselves through the way that we dress. So fashion is extremely important in helping us communicate with others. Now, this body of work, the Polaroids showed up during the time that I was creating the color images and rewriting history. And what I was realizing through exhibition was that my viewers were stopping at this, you know, wow, I can't believe it's paper and this color and it's a painting. And while it was really amazing to have that, that's why I wanted them to have that painterly aesthetic, at some point I started feeling like it was getting lost, that these were real people dealing with trauma. And so I needed to take away color, and that's the beauty of the black and white for me, is that color gives us so much information, and it sometimes can be too much information, and the black and white forces us to get closer to what's truly happening. And so for me, that was the pain that I needed my viewers to see, and so I stripped away the color and took them with Polaroid cameras.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to backtrack just a little bit. You were talking about fashion and how you studied fashion, and how it's a kind of armor. I love this outfit. This outfit is everything. Last night's outfit was everything. What's happening here with this look? Particularly this hat and this crystal.
I am sending messages to people about how I want to be read, how I want to be seen. I'm very clear about that. My hat, it took years for me to incorporate the hat into my wardrobe, because I was really looking for kind of like Steve Jobs in a way, where I'm like always in black, always in the turtleneck, always doing the same thing. And I wanted an item that was going to be my armor. I was feeling, as my career started getting higher and higher out there, I was feeling very vulnerable with the type of access that people were having to me, and the amount of energy that I needed to always be around. And so the hat became that armor to kind of help me feel more comfortable, really. Because I am an introvert. I'm a proud introvert.
Me too. People don't believe that, though. Nobody believes that, but I am.
Yeah, I'm a proud introvert, right? And so it's a lot of work for me to do public speaking and all of those things. And so that the hat just helps me center, just like the crystal does. It's like, you don't have to guess if I'm religious or spiritual. Mm-hmm. My crystal tells you. Like, I hope it does, right?
And it's so small.
That's just right. You can see it from across the room. So if you're not wanting to have that kind of spiritual conversation with me, you know to stay away, and I'm fine with that.
Mm-hmm. So this is another one of my favorite images, the splitting cells. I'm trying to remember exactly what you said, but I totally agree with you in terms of there's something so powerful about the absence of color. That colors emote so much energy and emotional language and all of that. But talk to us then about beauty. I think there's a particular conversation that we can have around beauty, particularly as it relates to Black women or Black bodies or Black people and beauty, because it's not always synonymous, right? Mm-hmm. So can you talk to us just a little bit about this particular series and beauty?
So I'm just in love with us.
Me?
You know, I'm just so in love.
What we need
I'm
to
just
do.
so in love with us. And it really starts even before the splitting of cells with writing history. I opened that entire collection with a darker skinned woman because I was very clear about my own privilege as a light skinned woman. And I needed to be clear about the direction of the work that I was going in, and that I would be addressing in some way colorism, not just racism, but colorism. And by the time I get to stripping the color away altogether, it's very obvious who the subject is, and I think the goal when I get to stripping away the color also then becomes getting those subjects past the space of their own humanity and turning them into what we call in Haitian spiritual. These are more spiritual, closer to the Almighty beings. And that's always really my goal, is to start like taking away that part of the humanity that hinders us, and then showing it with these, these magical beings.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. So, talking about magical beings, I'm going back to bell hooks because this is where I'm at. I want to talk first about this concept of rewriting history before we kind of more formally introduce this series. So, bell hooks wrote that we make the revolutionary history, telling the past as we have learned it, mouth to mouth. So talking about oral tradition. Telling the present as we see it, know and feel it in our hearts and with our words. Can you talk to us about what it means to rewrite history, particularly when when we here in Florida, so I have a couple of questions then, not for you to necessarily answer, but for me to kind of put into the room. So first of all, what is history? What is truth? What is narrative? What does it mean to cultivate an inclusive narrative? What is an inclusive narrative? What is representation and what is identities? So these are the things that I think you talk about a lot in your work. Toni Morrison talks often about the master narrative, and here we are at such a time as this, in the beautiful sunny state of Florida, where we are being told that African American history has no educational value. We are being told that projects like the 1619 Project are controversial or are erroneous somehow. So I would like for you to talk to us in your mind, or what's even the origin for rewriting history? What does that mean, and why is history important to you?
So clearly, I can't rewrite, like literally rewrite history. And that's never my goal, is to rewrite history. And I very much clearly understand that who gets to tell the history also controls the future. And who gets to erase history or disregard history also controls the future. So what this is always about memory. In some ways, we can start to see it as power, social power. And so there's a very good reason why that's happening. I get it. I don't like it, of course, but I know why. And I know that it's because it represents power. And so that becomes a very special time for us right now, because this is specifically where we need to get the memo. We can't sit on the side being like, oh, they're just doing, some like backward. No, they're very smart in understanding that who tells the narrative, who controls the history, how it's told gets to write policies in the future, gets to da-da-da-da-da-da-da. So we need to start tapping into that history as well. We need to be very clear about making sure that memory is a part of what we do now and moving forward in order to be at that table.
Thank you. So you have multiple identities. So, and you feel free to correct me, add identities. Woman, Black woman, Haitian woman, Caribbean woman, mother. I wanted to talk, especially though, more about your identity as a Haitian woman. I think that when we talk about rewriting history and talking about inclusive narratives, when we are taught, if and when we are taught about the Haitian Revolution, for example, we are often taught about male figures, such as Toussaint Louverture or Jean-Jacques Dessalines, but we are rarely taught about the women, the Black women, who were integral to liberation and freedom movements in Haiti. So I have here 3 women that I want to talk very briefly about, and I want you to kind of jump in at any point and sort of talk about how you reference these women or allude to their histories in your work. So the first one is Victoria Mantou? I would say Mantou, aka Grand Toya, who is believed to essentially have been abducted or taken from the area that's now known as Benin, but she was one of the Dahomey warriors. So when we, in popular culture now, when we think about Dahomey warriors, we think about Viola Davis and Woman King. We think about Denai Guerrera in Black Panther. And she was on the same plantation as a young Jean-Jacques Dessalines, and it is believed that she is the one who taught him combat. Which is, why do we not know that? Then we have Lieutenant Suzanne Senti-Belair, who was a general with in Toussaint Louverture's army, who was married. Oh, sorry, she was a sergeant who was also married to a general. She was called the Mighty Tigress. And then we have Cecile Fatchimal, who I think you probably relate to the most. She is noted as a very important voodoo priestess, queen figure. She's depicted here as having sacrificed a wild boar, which is a reference to one of the voodoo goddesses,
Urzuli Danto.
Danto, thank you, because I was going to butcher that. But it is believed that because of her ritual ceremony, was it a week later, that over 1,000 plantations were burned and over 1,000 oppressors were killed. because she made this ritual sacrifice and she did this ceremony and prayer. And so if you could just sort of talk to us about these women, about, again, your identity as a Haitian woman, but also leading up to that, the ways in which magic and magic power and ritual also shows up in your work.
So I am a firm believer that spirituality is at the center of Black freedom. And Cecile in particular does, you're correct, and speak to me the most. They all do, they all show up. But it's the ceremony that Cecile performs with Boukman that really inspires Black freedom, because it's through this ceremony that they go and they fight, they grab their machetes, and they do really what was considered impossible to do, all with machetes.
Yes.
So I believe that, I find that I've been referencing that ceremony and her over and over and over again. And in particular, Iseli Danto shows up often in my work. She, that Loa represents vengeance, war. In fact, the sculpture at the Met is a sculpture that I created, which is called, based on that name, Iseli Danto.
Yeah.
And so it's not, the message isn't of vengeance and war in that way, but it's justice. And justice is always coming up for me.
Okay. Thank you. So I want to talk about magic. So I called Fabiola, and she probably was like, this girl is crazy. Because the first thing that I kind of did when I was like, I heard you say that you were influenced by the dark crystal in the labyrinth, and so was I. We talked about this for I don't know how long.
We got so corny. We're like, dance magic, dance.
We were singing. I think especially what's cool for me is two Black women bonding over this body of work that, and you talk about this brilliantly, but there was something about the influence of the images from the Dark Crystal and from Labyrinth, particularly for me with Labyrinth. I know all the songs. I wanted to be Jennifer Connelly, and I wanted to be in this world, right? And there's something about world making. Adrienne Marie Brown talks a lot about world making and imagination. To me, this wasn't escapism. This was there was something that I was connecting with in terms of like the moodiness, notions around haziness and glitter and exploration and adventure.
Otherness,
yes.
And otherness as well.
Yes, and otherness. And it wasn't until I heard you say that I realized that this is actually what I'm connecting with in a lot of your work. Like I saw it, but until you kind of confirmed it for me. So I just want to put out some words here. So you have described yourself often as a time traveler. She was a time traveler. So in looking at your work, again, words like ethereal, hazy, futuristic, otherworldly, multidimensional, folklore, talk to us about how that shows up in your work, but also what do you want us to kind of learn about the power of folklore and or magic in your work?
It's the ability to shape material that hopefully can become like matter, right? Something that can be more tangible. And there's something so amazing about those movies for me, because as a child, I was 4 or 5 when that came out, and I was obsessed and hooked right then and there. And one of the things that made me so obsessed with it was that it explained the world to me in ways that a 4-year-old could understand. And I saw myself, like Jim Henson was like kind of brilliant in the way that he created society in this puppet world, right? And then used magic as a way to kind of explain that otherness. And so when I started focusing on my artwork, then it was like, how do I do that? How do I speak about that in ways that even children can understand? They can tap in, or anyone, someone who doesn't necessarily agree with me, we're totally opposite ends of the belief spectrum, but it doesn't matter because we can meet somewhere in the middle there with the work, if I do it well enough that way.
Thank you. So then let's jump into some of the other images from Rewriting History. So these are just stunning, and you mentioned to us before about wanting to kind of lead in this work with a darker skinned figure. Yeah, just talk to us about the imagery that's happening here, and the longevity of this project, because I know that it's I know that it's ongoing.
Rewriting history, no, not anymore. With the Yale acquisition, I finally was like, now it's time to be done.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
So it took me about 5 years from the time that I began it until the time that I closed it to make all of the dresses and all the props and everything. And so because every dress would take months and months and months to make, I decided that I was going to utilize my time in the best way that I could by taking 2 images, so 2 different perspectives of the one dress. So what we're looking at is actually 2 shots of the same dress. This one is not the same. This is not the same, but this is in the same space. So the set, even though it's dark, is in a very tiny room. And so I also had to learn how to use a very limited amount of space, not just material, because I didn't have the money to even create fabric dresses. I needed to figure out how to work in small spaces. And so this is in a Brooklyn apartment that's kind of like at the end of that stage to where I'm sitting right here.
And talk to us about, this isn't Whipped Peter, this is
Gordon.
Gordon.
Enslaved Gordon,
Okay.
yeah. And so this image is one of my favorite images when I really need to like dive into that pain and just like deal with it. I go to that image. That's one of the images that I go to. And this is the image that caused Yale to want to acquire. Originally, we're going to try to just get that one image because they have the original photograph in their collection. And they have the largest collection of all of these photographs. And what they realized is, no, we can't buy this one image. We have to actually buy everything because all of it is overlapping together in the collection. And so Gordon is really important in time travel, right? So there's this depth that's happening with the subject that has the whip marks on her back, and then Gordon that's in the foreground. And it's so forcing the viewer to really not just look at the subject, but past the subject, memory, and holding on to memory.
Okay, how do I formulate this? When I see her back, it does not feel to me that she has those keloids on her back, but that she is almost like honoring that memory. Is that accurate?
Absolutely.
Okay.
She's honoring that memory.
Yeah.
So this image was created, I think 5 years ago, and I somehow understood that we would be here now, where we are with memory trying to be erased. Right? And so that was exactly what I was feeling then when I made that. Just trying to hold on to the memory, because in that space is truth.
I have no idea what time it. Oh, Okay. Genius, Eric. Genius.
This is actually a remake of that dress.
Okay.
So later on, I start making the dresses in a more archival fashion, and my technique just gets better as I decide what I want the sculptures to be, and then light became very important to the process for me, and so I remade essentially all of the dresses to have the features that I wanted. So this is just a remake of that one,
Okay.
in a totally different way, of course.
Talk to us about the process. So in case it is not clear, these dresses are made out of paper. So talk to us about the process of your work with paper. How did that come to be? All of that.
So my work with paper came out of a place of limitation, and so that's become a very permanent part of my process, actually. Yes, I may have more access to materials than like when I first started. You know, when I first started, I was on public assistance, single mother of 3, living in the back living room of my parents while I was in a pre-med program. And so I knew I wanted to keep using art as therapy to get through the medical program. But I did not have enough money to buy the fabric. And so, but I had the title Rewriting History, and then I realized that there are too many items in our society that shape it that are made out of paper, like the Constitution, currency to buy human bodies. In different cultures, we have the Quran. Here we have the Bible, right? And so items that seem like they're etched in stone are not, they're on paper. And so then the material becomes very important to the process. And then so I had to teach myself how to work with paper and how to make patterns and do all of that. And I just dived in, honestly.
I don't know if we have time for this, but like med school, making paper, film, fashion, you have had like, you are a time traveler.
Yes.
Because you have had multiple lives and
Yes.
experiences.
Yes.
Yeah. So let's talk about the piece that we now have, Marie Antoinette Is Dead,
Yes.
which is my absolute favorite as well. Yeah.
Yes. So I have this thing that I do with my work where I play tricks on people. You know, I insert little things to see if they're going to find them. There's like a little trail of crumbs that I like to do. Sometimes that's literally within the photograph where I'll put little things in there. Other times it's with title. And my little trick with this one was, obviously that's not Marie Antoinette.
No.
And so I use that name because I really wanted to use a figure that we know historically that stood for opulence, access, and all of those things, right? And so Marie Antoinette becomes that figure for me because she symbolized that more than de Pompadour did. And so that was the little trick. I said, I'm going to be clever. I'm going to piss so many art historians off. And I did. I got so many responses like on IG, like, you know that's not. I'm like, yes.
Yes, clearly.
Clearly. So I succeeded in that. And so what I chose to do was change the writing desk out for a mini altar. And that space. And so what's on that altar are the crystals. The dark crystal always shows up, really. It does. The voodoo dolls. It's a very, very simplified version of the altar. But I really just wanted to just do a recreation, but swapping to show how these things also overlap, right? We can't talk about the transatlantic slavery moment without looking at Europe. We can't do that. So this is why looking at it through that lens becomes crucial. But then I get to do these little things over here to show that this is something that was taken away during enslavement as well. And this is something that we need to reclaim.
Okay, thank you. I'm just gonna shift through this a little bit. Just look at the amazing detail there.
My artist hands.
I'm good. This maybe should have come a little earlier. I put this in here because the first time that I saw Marie Antoinette Is Dead, I immediately was like, that is Nazra. And if you don't know who that is, she is an amazing, amazing vocal artist who I discovered sometime in the 90s when she was beginning, I think, her career as the background singer for Erykah Badu. And she has this like rock, soul, funk, neo soul, I don't even know. She's also otherworldly to me. When she performs, it's like magic embodied.
Totally. I mean,
right?
that's why she was Lenny Kravitz's singer she only just stopped being the backup singer for Lenny. Yeah.
Yeah. She's like everything. So
Yes.
tell her I said, hey.
I will.
So, I'm like, how could, she has all this beautiful style. So it was just so powerful to me to see how you incorporated this amazing artist who has this other intricate sort of history. So I guess what I want to ask here is, how do you choose your subjects? Is it people that you know, people that you meet on the street? Like, how does that work?
They're usually people that are within my vicinity. What's the word I'm looking for? They're close by, and so it's really important for me to not work with strangers.
Okay.
Which means if I do think I want to work with you as a subject, now we have to have lunch, dinner a few times. We need to get to know each other. We need to develop a friendship. With Nazra, she actually hired me. She was like, please, can you be my photographer for my album? Oh. And this is before Rewriting History started. And I said, yeah. So I photographed her for her album. And then later on, I came to her and I was like, do you want to? She was like crying because she was like, I get to wear a paper dress. I was like, I've had people cry about that for different reasons. It's a little painful, but so they're always sisters. They become sisters and they become family. They're my tribe. So even the little girl in Follow the Drinking Gourd, her mother I went to elementary school with, Catholic school with.
Okay.
And so, there's always some trail. Yeah.
Cool.
Yale.
I very quickly, I just want to say that to me, there are two major things that have happened to you in the last couple of years. One, I think, is this acquisition by Yale, because, we've talked about this. You're talking about essentially a library and an archive that has acquired the work of an artist who is engaging with historical documents. So it's not like a museum has acquired your work. You're talking about a library that houses some of the world's most important rare manuscripts. So to me, that's just like...
Huge. Huge.
Yeah.
The Met and Yale were the biggest. Because when I first started the journey, somebody said to me, "What do you want out of this?" And I said, "I'm going to be in the Met." And my father kind of laughed, bless his heart. He wasn't trying to be cruel, but he was like, first of all, you're Black. First of all, you're a woman. Thirdly, you're a Haitian. I mean, you're still living. It was all of these things. You're a contemporary artist. Like, what are you doing? And I was like, I'm going to get to the Met. And that was the very first time he ever told me he was proud of me that night. When I was like, did I finally impress you? He's like, yes. Yes, you did.
You don't even have to get a bigger crystal. You're good.
It would take over my whole body.
So now let's talk about, and we had this conversation, but it appears to me that over time, you have, I don't know if evolve is the right word, shifted, I don't know what the right word is, but moved more from working with photography to, it seems to me, or it feels to me, that you're really, what's the right word? That you're really, there's like a life force and a vitality in the sculpted work. Like you have moved from photography to this sculpted work that to me feels like there's something happening there. So I want to talk about that shift, and is it a shift? And if so, how is it?
Yeah, I guess we can look at this and the next one because they're kind of. So yeah, this is the Met exhibition.
Is that, you want me to go to the?
Yeah, you can stay here because
Okay.
that dress was done for the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum in Boston for an event there. And this is at the same time that the Met approaches me for the sculpture, for their exhibition. And at this point, I was already thinking, I definitely need to get deeper into time traveling with my sculpture work. What did that look like? And then the Met comes in after this, and I'm like, oh, do I get to like do what I want to do? They're like, yep, just give us a sketch. Because up until now, I had not sketched anything. Everything was just in my head. So I do a sketch, and they approve it right off the bat. And I just go crazy. I put Haiti, I infuse Haiti all up in that. Just like, Haiti, here we are.
Yeah. Well, in case anyone does not sort of know, tell us what this is. So the Met approached you to do what specifically?
They approached me to make a sculpture. And originally they wanted me to do an apron. And I said no. I said, you've seen everything that I can do. I'm not doing an apron. I'm going to do a dress. And they're like, okay, yeah, good idea. So because the focus was on Afrofuturism, we're at this very special moment of talking about what that is and the recreation of futures in time and spaces. Particularly where Met's concerned, it's because of the movement, the forced migration of the Black people that originally occupied Seneca Village, which is what is now Central Park. And they're part of that ground, right? And so they needed to speak to that, and this is part of that story of talking about now what would it look like if we time traveled and we were looking at the space of this woman that owned the house. And so what I didn't know was that my dress was going to be the focal point, and that she would be the owner of that house in many ways. And so that's how it's transformed into the space.
And this period room ends at the end of this year? Or when
In
exactly?
November.
In November, okay. So it's a period room, it's been up for about 2 years?
Yes.
Okay.
It will be the second year in November.
And it's called Before Yesterday We Could Fly, which is a reference to, I'm sorry this picture's not the best, but it's a reference to Virginia Hamilton's classic children's book called The People Could Fly, American Black Folktales, which essentially is about enslaved peoples using their imagination to basically liberate themselves. So they basically said, like, we're done with this enslavement process, like slavery is whack. And so we're going to collectively get together and fly ourselves out of here.
Yes.
And so, it has all of these sort of very Afrofuturistic moments. And you've talked about this throughout our time tonight, but what for you is Afrofuturism? Because, we had this conversation around, I remember when Afrofuturism kind of became like this term that everyone was kind of sort of using. And I would argue that over the last several years, Afrofuturism has definitely evolved, particularly if you're talking about Afrofuturism as it relates to literary writers or authors versus even musicians and or visual artists. So what does it mean for you, Afrofuturism?
The best way I can put it is that we're human projectors. We're just projecting. It's like a child. It's like a child that has something really traumatic, awful happening to that child, right? What do? They kind of leave their bodies to deal with that and go somewhere else. A lot of people describe dealing with pain and trauma in that way, right? You have to go somewhere else to just deal with it to survive. And so it becomes something about survival. It's not just about projecting onto the future, but it's saying, how can I survive long enough to see that happen? How can my kin, how can my family, my tribe survive and make it to see that happen, right? So it's the livelihood, it's the way to survive, and it's a way to project that, and you're kind of just trying to work to that goal. That's what it is for me.
Yeah. Beautiful. So if you're in New York or going to New York between now and November. So we have, I think, 4 or 5 minutes, and then we'll have some questions. So maybe we can just sort of quickly talk more about some of your sculptural pieces.
So this is the work that has taken me to where I am right now. I'm very interested in altars and shrines. I always have been, but now I'm at a place where I can actually really do that work. And that's what I'm teaching my students in Arkansas right now. Arkansas, the University of Central Arkansas was fantastic enough to create its first, I would say, hybrid of a residency program where I'm a resident and I'm a teaching artist, and I'm teaching seniors, sophomores, juniors, have like 82 plus students they form my team with an end goal of an exhibition. And so they're working with me in the field. They're making basically columbarium, which is like the ruins, the temple, all out of paper that's been donated by a paper mill. This is my first self-portrait sculpture that was in mind when I was thinking about this exhibition that I'm working on right now. This is the Relic. It's a maquette, so it's not large. It's about this size. And right now, it's in my studio being created. It's 6 feet tall.
Wow.
It's rather large. And the actual large one has, just one stone with aquamarine that is extremely expensive just to put that in that chest. But this is going to be talking about forced migration via water, right? And so all of that comes into the story. Black angels, death, Haiti. This is the render of this piece of the exhibition. And so what we're creating in Arkansas right now are all these individual niches that will form the set that make it look like a columbarium, like as if you've traveled underground. And then in each niche with that light, we'll have a sculpture in there, and the students get to put an individual project in there. And so they're also blessed with being able to say that they're part of a professional exhibition at the end of all of this.
Wonderful.
And then of course we have the altar with my relic and my other sculptures. And the next slide shows just a rough render of what that room would look like. And yes, we are making cherry blossom trees, so life-size ones. And so that's where I am right now. That's what I'm working on right now. That exhibition will open up in Arkansas in May, and then it will travel. Some of the places I can't say yet because they're surprises, but I hope they come here to Florida, to Gainesville.
You took the words out of my mouth. Thank you. So thank you so much, Fabiola. We are going to now open up the floor for questions. I think Paige and Eric are walking around with the microphone.
Let us know if you have a question.
Thank you so much for your talk and being here tonight. I'm curious, as a maker, if you can speak a little bit more to this process of taking a material that is both often ephemera and yet is also the material on which so many things are inscribed, as we talked about earlier, and maybe speak a little bit to the process of maybe a transformation in your own mind of taking this from something that was being a prop for photography into something that is becoming immersive and integral to your practice.
So even in rewriting history, I was seeing paper, the material, in that way, because it's the only material in our world that shape shifts like it does, right? One instance, it's all of the things that we know, and some of the things that we forget, like paper plates and napkins and all of those things. And so I feel like what I've always been doing is staying true to the way that it shifts in our world. And so it's a very natural journey for me to go from the paper dress to a columbarium, because it's like, that's what it's been doing. You know, it's just has such an impact in our world.
I thought I saw a hand on that side. Yeah.
Hello, check, check, check.
This. Right here.
Hello, Fabiola.
Hi.
My name is Elshama, and I really resonate with your art, especially being a Haitian woman. I wanted to know what inspired you to pursue art as a career when that's not typically seen as a career within our culture.
That's a really good question. I find that I had to be very brave, because in our culture, you know, I come from a family that's filled with doctors, nurses, you know, the lawyers, and there's nothing against that. But it seems to be like those are the only valid options to be someone in society. And interestingly, my father gave up art to become the director of human resources in New York. And so I think there was some of that too. It's like, I had to give up my art. And so you probably should do that because you have a family. You're not going to be able to support that. And so when I decided to leave medical school, I was 3 months away from graduating with references in hand, honor roll, everything. I had put my family through so much, my children through so much to get to that wonderful place. But I still love science and medicine, but I had to say, sorry guys, psych, change course. You know, we're gonna change course, but that requires bravery, it requires honesty. Honestly, my age really mattered in this case, and that's because through time I learned to accept who I am and who I was at the time that I was making that choice. And it's a benefit that sometimes young people don't have. They don't have the experience that time brings that requires that bravery and honesty with thyself. And so when I said I was leaving, I was like, and that's what I'm doing, right? I'm a full adult with children, and so I'm clear about that. So it's just a lot of honesty. Yeah.
Other questions? I think.
Right up front, thank you.
Yes, that's one.
Thank you for coming to Gainesville and giving us this wonderful presentation. My question revolves around your, I guess, science background.
Mm-hmm.
Have you considered incorporating any of your medical exposure or any science into your work, considering that you've incorporated some metaphysical aspects, et cetera?
Yeah, actually, if you want to go back really quick, the Peregrine sculpture, the angel sculpture, the very back of that, what you can't see is the spine. Oh, wow. So I've done, when this whole thing turns around, it has pyrite stones all the way around it, inside. So that reflects my love not just for stones, you know, like I don't want to just talk about being a hippie, right? That would be weird. But I want to talk about my love for science as well, and meteors and stars and all of those things, and what I think we really are, because I understand that our cells are made of stars, literally, the material that stars are made of, right? So the science does show up in my work, the human anatomy shows up in my work. And so, yes, with this new project I'm working on, that is definitely a part of it, because I plan to show, and I am thinking of, the body as landscape and terrain. And so science is going to be a very important part of that. Yeah.
I'd love to take one more question maybe before we have our reception. Here we go, thank you.
Thank you for being here. Fantastic, beautiful
Thank you.
work. How many different types of paper do you use? Do do you have a favorite one, and do you miss the magic of the Polaroid?
I love the Polaroid. I'll start backwards. I have like 8 of them. They need to bring it all back. That's a different conversation, I guess. And I still use them. And my favorite papers are down to, it's kind of hard because I'm like literally obsessed with paper. And so, but in my own practice, I work with mulberry paper and craft paper. So it's very, very simple for me. And even this whole entire mausoleum project or columbarium project that's being created is using brown craft paper, recycled, because I'm also trying to teach my students how to be conscious, environmentally conscious in their practice as artists. But those are really my favorite papers to work with.
I think we had one more question, Eric. Yeah.
Is this the one more?
I think it, oh,
So you're going to be the second last. We'll be the very, very last. Please.
Hi, I'm curious about the role of like the trick, like with the use of Marie Antoinette's name. Like, what is the role of the trick or like the pitfall in your thinking about the work, or how you want people to perceive it?
Well, it's not really a pitfall. It's really just to get people more interested in if they think that I got it wrong, that'll force them right then and there to look into it, right? And like, but why did she do that? So my goal is always to find ways to bring people closer to the work that I'm doing, not further away. And so if even the title then is trickery, that kind of holds them to be like, what's going on over here? So that's really the goal.
all right.
Dr. Porchia Moore, Fabiola Jean-Louis.
Thank you so much.
I'll just say the museum is open until 9. Fabulous photography.